accurate record, we ask that everyone speaks one at a time and does not speak over each other. Also, speak clearly and loudly. When needed, Ms. Alonso will stop the hearing process and ask for clarification. After the hearing, Ms. Alonso will produce the official hearing transcript, which will be available on the Office of Tax Appeals website. At this time, I'd like to offer a few reminders to help this process run as smoothly as possible. Please say your name before you speak. Please mute your microphone if you're not speaking to avoid feedback and background noise. This proceeding is being broadcast live, and any information shared on your screen is publicly viewable. Also, the Office of Tax Appeals is not a court, but is an independent appeals body. The office is staffed by tax experts and is independent of the state's tax agencies. Respondent, do you have any questions about what I've just said before we go on the record?
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And Dr. Plewe, do you have any questions on anything I've just said?
No questions. Thank you.
This is Judge Lee. Thank you. In that case, let's go on the record. We are opening the record in the appeal of Ryan R. Plewe, DDS MS Inc. This matter is being held before the Office of Tax Appeals. The OTA case number is 231214842. Today's date is August 21st, 2024. The time is 9:33 a.m. I am Administrative Law Judge Mike Lee, and I will be hearing and deciding this case. For the record, will the parties please state their names, starting with Respondent Franchise Tax Board?
Blake Cunningham for Respondent Franchise Tax Board.
And Brad Catino also for Respondent Franchise Tax Board. Thank you.
This is Judge Lee. Thank you. And for appellant?
Ryan Plewe. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Plewe. This is Judge Lee. Let's move on to my minutes and orders. As discussed with the parties, pre-hearing conference on August 5th, 2024, and notated in my minutes and orders, the issue in this matter involves the late payment penalty. Dr. Plewe will testify as a witness at this oral hearing. Appellant's Exhibits 1 and 2 were entered into the record in my minutes and orders. Respondents' Exhibits A through E were also entered into the record in my minutes and orders. Mr. Cunningham, do you have any questions or comments before we begin with appellant's presentation?
This is Blake Cunningham. No questions or comments. Thank you.
This is Judge Lee. Thank you. And Dr. Plewe, do you have any questions or comments before we begin with your presentation?
No questions, Your Honor. Thank you.
This is Judge Lee. Thank you. Dr. Plewe, I'm now going to swear you in.
Okay.
Would you raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. You have up to 10 minutes for your presentation and testimony, starting at 9:35 a.m. Please proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. So I appreciate the opportunity to show that I do indeed have reasonable cause to support the abatement of the tax penalty in question here. I've been a client of Thomas Dahl CPAs since October of 2011. I have always relied on them to review my income and inform me what taxes I need to pay and when. This particular tax year in question was no different. As you can see in the records from the Franchise Tax Board, I did make payments in 2022 that were applied to the 2021 tax year. On March 17th of 2022, as I indicated, I paid $114. On April 18th of 2022, as I indicated, I paid $15,000. And on September 29th of 2022, I paid $2,633. I made these payments because that is what my CPA told me to pay, and they told me to pay those amounts on those dates. Because of this, I was very surprised when I received a letter from the Franchise Tax Board in April of 2023 which said there were still taxes owed for 2021. I've always paid my taxes in full and on time. I immediately contacted my CPA about the letter, and they advised me to go ahead and pay the amount due, which I did, and that they needed time to look into their records for me. When they got back in touch with me, my CPA said he felt bad that they did not do a good job informing me of when this payment needed to be made and for how much. And because of that, they would write a letter stating that they disagreed with the late fee penalty and would request that it be refunded. That is the letter that you have, Your Honor. And I'd just like to read that letter again right now. So that was dated April 18th, 2023. And it says, "To whom it may concern, we are sending this letter in response to a notice received by our client dated April 3rd, 2023, notice number 665-419-823-0324, regarding a balance due for his 2021 corporate taxes. This payment is being submitted by our client today, April 18th, 2023. We disagree with the penalties applied and request to use the first-time penalty abatement waiver and wish to apply it to this notice. Please waive the penalty applied and refund that amount of penalty once payment is processed. Sincerely, Thomas Dahl, CPAs, signed by Brett Lamone, who is my main CPA that I work with there." In the Franchise Tax Board opening brief that was sent to me, they said, "The burden is on the taxpayer to show reasonable cause exists to support the abatement of the penalty. To establish reasonable cause, a taxpayer must show that the failure to timely pay the amount shown as tax on the return occurred despite the exercise of ordinary business care and prudence." They go on to say that the reason for missing the deadline must be such that an ordinary, intelligent, and prudent business person would have acted similarly under the same circumstance. I can show that I do indeed have reasonable cause that justifies the abatement of the late payment penalty of $2,000, 921.08, and the tax penalty of $52.65. And that I acted as an ordinary, intelligent, and prudent business person would have acted under the same circumstance. So, for one, I have been a client of Thomas Dahl CPAs since October of 2011, and I'm in close contact with them every year to know what tax amounts I need to pay throughout each year and when. Number two, I have always paid my taxes in full and when they have told me to pay them. Number three, my payment history in 2022 shows that I was making tax payments throughout that year. As I mentioned, I make those payments when they tell me to do so. Number four, my CPA wrote a letter to prove that they do not agree with this tax penalty and that I should not be responsible to pay this because they are my advisors and I pay taxes according to what they tell me to pay and when. They did not properly inform me of the amount I needed to pay that year and the date by which it needed to be paid. Once again, I would really appreciate a refund of the $2,921.08 late payment penalty and the $52.65 tax penalty, because as I have explained, I have reasonable cause to support the abatement of that penalty. I acted how an ordinary, intelligent, and prudent business person would have acted in that same situation. I relied on the advice of a tax professional who has expertise in California tax law. Their advice, or lack thereof, was based on the taxpayers or my full disclosure of relevant facts. I gave them all the needed income and expense information prior to the filing and payment deadline, and the taxpayers or my reliance on that advice was reasonable. Thank you for listening to my reasoning, Your Honor.
Thank you, Dr. Blue, for your presentation and testimony. Let me turn to the Franchise Tax Board. Mr. Cunningham, do you have any questions for Dr. Blue?
This is Blake Cunningham. I have no questions. Thank you.
This is Judge Lee. Thank you. Let me ask one question here. Dr. Blue, you stated there was 3 payments made in 2022. I guess, did your CPA explain why they wanted you to make 3 separate payments in 2022?
They didn't explain the details of that, Your Honor. As I mentioned, I'm in touch with them closely throughout the year, and they will send me updates of, we need you to pay this at this time, or we need you to pay that at that time. And so that's just what they told me to pay on those dates.
Thank you. At this time, I'm going to turn it to Respondent Franchise Tax Board. This is now your turn for your presentation. You have up to 10 minutes starting at 9:42 a.m.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Blake Cunningham, and I'm here with Brad Catino, and together we represent Respondent Franchise Tax Board. This appeal is regarding appellant's failure to establish reasonable cause to abate the late payment penalty. Appellant is an S corporation. For taxable year 2021, appellant filed a timely return and reported tax due that it didn't pay on time. Since respondent did not receive full payment by the due date of the return, March 15th, 2022, respondent properly imposed a $2,921 late payment penalty in accordance with the Revenue and Taxation Code Section 19132. Appellant was also assessed applicable interest. Appellant paid the penalty and filed a claim for refund, which was denied. The calculation of the penalty is not in dispute. However, appellant asserts that the late payment penalty should not be abated because of reasonable cause and the first-time abatement waiver. The law presumes that the late payment penalty was imposed correctly. Here, appellant contends that it paid its tax late because it relied on its representatives as to the due date of the payment for the 2021 taxable year. To establish reasonable cause exists in reliance on an expert, a taxpayer must show that it reasonably relied on a tax professional for substantive tax advice. Each taxpayer has a non-delegable duty to file a tax return by the due date, and this non-delegable duty also applies in the late payment context. Compliance with the non-delegable obligation to timely pay a tax liability is not a substantive matter of tax law, because advice regarding clear deadlines is not substantive advice from a tax professional. Appellant has not established reasonable cause to abate the late payment penalty. In addition, Revenue and Taxation Code Section 19132.5 allows individual taxpayers a one-time abatement of penalties, similar to the Internal Revenue Service's first-time abatement. However, this abatement may only be requested by individuals for taxable years beginning on or after January 1st, 2022. Here, appellant is an S corporation, not an individual, and the year at issue is taxable year 2021, which is before January 1st, 2022. Thus, appellant is not entitled to the first-time abatement. In addition, respondent may abate the late payment penalty if appellant can establish his failure to timely was due to reasonable cause and not willful neglect and occurred despite ordinary business care and prudence. Appellant's assertion it did not know the due dates for paying the tax does not establish reasonable cause or abatement of the penalty. In conclusion, appellant has not established reasonable cause to abate the late payment penalty, and the one-time abatement is not available to appellant. Therefore, respondent asks that his action denying appellant's refund claim be sustained. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
This is Judge Lee. Thank you, Mr. Cunningham, for your presentation. Let me now just turn it back to Dr. Plewe for any rebuttal statement that you would like to make. You have up to 5 minutes, starting at 9:46 a.m.
The only thing I would say that I mentioned in my opening statement was just that I do rely on a tax professional who's familiar with tax laws in California. That's why I hire them. So I rely on what they tell me to pay and when. As I mentioned, they wrote a letter, stating that they did not think that I should have to pay that penalty because I do rely on them. And I know that I've already explained my thoughts and my position in my opening statement, so I'll just leave it at that.
This is Judge Lee. Thank you for your rebuttal, Dr. Plewe. At this time, I do not have any more questions for either party. So I believe that concludes our hearing. Thank you everyone for your presentation today. This case is submitted on August 21st, 2024, and the record is now closed. I will decide your case later on, and I will send you a written opinion of my decision within 100 days. Today's hearing in the appeal of Ryan R. Plewe, DDS MS Inc. is now adjourned. Thank you, and goodbye, everyone.